your mind is okay. She off your mind, nobody sound like me.
Chai! Now wow, people wey suppose talk truth to power don't off mind. And if we talk, now 500,000 they go summer us, call them hate speech. But fear not, my ego don't come. Ingo torchlight every corner, nooks and cranny of all these bad people where they spoil our country. So my people make we loud, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My people make we shout, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, man of the masses, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My ego politico, yeah, yeah. My ego don't come, oh, yeah, yeah. This one not the off in mind, oh, yeah, yeah. My ego don't come, oh, yeah, yeah. Can in the touchlight every corner, oh, yeah, yeah. My ego don't come, oh, yeah, yeah. Okay, some people be they holla say they want the power. Chai, them be promise us say we go get light and power. Nah. Them hustle sote they can't get the power. But now they know they do anything with the power. Sure. Every day, dollar, just they get the higher power. Over naira. Still them talk say, make we off mind. But thank God say, my ego don't come. So my people make you loud, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My people make we shout, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, man of the masses, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My ego die the politico, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. This one not they off in mind, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. Person where they do evil, no one make person talk. Them say that my ego, that man too they talk. He too they talk. Say my ego diary, he they hot like pepper. But every day then they take money in bulk. Poor man picking, they the street they hawk. Still them talk say, make we no talk. But thank God say, my ego don't come. So my people make you loud, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My people make you shout, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, man of the masses, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. My ego diary politico, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. This man not the off in mind, oh, yo, yo. My ego don't come, oh, yo, yo. Aha. Now you wanna done here, oh. Mayegun la wa mo la mo to do do do. Mayegun diary, Mayegun number one. Mayegun la wa mo la mo to do do do. Mayegun diary, Mayegun number one. Mayegun ti de o, ọ̀rẹ́ ara yìí. Mayegun diary, Mayegun number one.
Good morning to you, good afternoon to you, good evening to you from wherever you are joining from. This is Mayegun live, and it is Sunday sermon.
Àṣírí ọ̀jẹ̀lú kì í bò níbẹ̀ o. Bó bá ṣe eré, àní Mayegun máa wí. Ó sì tún ṣe eré, wàá gbọ́ níbẹ̀ o. Mayegun diary politico. Godfatherism kò sí lọ́rọ̀ Mayegun diary. Ẹ farabalẹ̀ sẹ́ o kẹ́kọ̀rọ̀ lẹ́nu.
Thank you very much for joining me. Share the broadcast. Invite your friends. Invite your not so friendly friends. I have a message for the over 50s. I also have the message for the under 50s. It is Sunday sermon, a no old spa session. Join us if you are going to be comfortable with the uncomfortable truth, said in so many uncomfortable ways. Yes, share the broadcast.
Lórí Facebook, and yes, lórí YouTube. Ayẹ̀kú ti dé. Àní ẹ̀sùn láti. Ayẹ̀kú ti dé. Ọba bá gbé wúrẹ́. Ayẹ̀kú máa bí. Àní ẹ̀sùn láti. Ayẹ̀kú ti dé. Ijó ìgbádìí yẹ. Ayẹ̀kú máa bí. Àní ẹ̀sùn láti. Ayẹ̀kú ti dé. Presido bá rú sí o. Ayẹ̀kú máa bí. Àní ẹ̀sùn láti. Ayẹ̀kú ti dé.
There is this reading I'm going to do just before we kick the whole show started. So it's a citation, okay? And it is about Yoruba economy. It's called the economy of the early Yoruba kingdoms. Then I have another part, which is, where is that one? Yeah, I've got another part, which is the politics of early Yoruba kingdom. I am taking that from a book called The People, or let me say the Yoruba People, which is the people of Yorubaland. So sit back while I read this. I want to leave it on the diary. So, and then I will start, right? It's quite going to be a long reading, by the way, but listen, very important. The economy of the early Yoruba kingdom history. The early Yoruba kingdom were thriving in terms, this was before Nigeria, were thriving in terms of economy. The Yoruba people participated in various activities such as farming, trading, craft specialization, hunting, fishing, and owning domestic animals. The early Yoruba kingdoms ran a patrilineage system. Skills and craft were passed down through the father's family line. As a result, lineages became known for a particular skill and or craft set. The development of the Yoruba economy can be divided into two eras, with the first one being the pre-colonial era, which spanned from the 11th century to the early 16th century. This era took place before the European involvement in Yorubaland. The second era would be kickstarted with the arrival of European traders at the beginning of the 16th century, and it would last until the 19th century. Now, the pre-colonial era, the 11th century to the early 16th century Yorubaland, the creation of many cities, kingdoms, and towns in Yorubaland acted as a helpful catalyst in the transformation of its economic life in the 15th century. The Yoruba community already had a form of a simple trade structure as early as the 11th century in the form of a barter system. As their civilization progressed, cowries were used as a form of payment. Soon, it became established as the main currency, and it was used for both commercial and social payments. The second era, the early 16th century to the 19th century Yorubaland. When the European coastal trade started in the early 16th century, it transformed many Yoruba kingdoms, ultimately shaping their economy. The transatlantic trade began with the slave trade. This aided the development of long-distance trade relations between the Europeans, Americans, and the early Yoruba people. Later on, legitimate trade replaced the slave trade in the coastal regions. The kingdoms became a collection points for cocoa, palm oil, and kernels. These goods were brought to Lagos from inland kingdoms like Oyo and Benin, where it was then exported to Europe. During this period, trade with Europeans was conducted only through Oyo, thus making it a monopolistic affair. Before any traders or merchants could conduct business with Europeans, the Alaafin of Oyo had to issue a royal license. The kingdom and their economic framework, that is the Yoruba kingdoms and their economic framework, how we set out before now. In case if those your uncles continue to tell you that we can't stand on our own because of Nigeria, listen, as mentioned earlier, many activities contributed to the development of the Yoruba kingdom's economic framework. The emergence of the royal cities, kingdoms, and other major towns widened opportunities in other occupations, such as house building, arts, entertainment, priestly occupations, healthcare, and herbal occupations, and perhaps, most importantly, commerce. All this later aided the development of the Yoruba civilization. Now, agriculture. The early Yoruba people carried out many economic activities, but the most predominant one was farming. Communities engaged in the production of crops, mostly for feeding the local populace, but they also did so for commercial purposes. These goods were exchanged or sold for cowries in local and distant markets for materials they could not produce. Agriculture had always been a pillar of the economy, even before most Yoruba kingdoms were created. While agriculture was not the only activities they engaged in, it constituted a large portion of their economy. One reason agriculture thrives in Yoruba land was the combination of suitable soils and adequate rains. This made most of the Yoruba homeland ideal for this activity. However, not all of the Yoruba lands were suitable for this purpose. There were places with lagoons, creeks, and swamps that were just not suitable for some crop types. These areas were the homes of the Ilaje, Ishekiri, Ijo, and Ikale people. The other belts close to the north, the home of the Ekiti, Owo, Ondo, Ijebu, and Egba kingdoms, produce crops like yam, cassava, and cocoa. Yams also grew well in Ekiti and Akoko. One of the reasons for this was that these towns were located in partly forest and partly grassland areas. This greatly influenced the type of crop produced. For instance, the grasslands were best for cereal crops, mostly millet, maize, and guinea corn, and some beans. Therefore, foods and delicacies made from cereals and beans featured more prominently in the diets of those living there. Oil palm was another crop that was often grown by the Yoruba people. However, these trees thrived more in regions with lightly forested areas. Palm oil and palm wine are the two most important byproducts of this tree, and they were used daily by most Yoruba people. However, other materials like oil palm fronds could be gotten from oil palm trees. Fronds are the main material used in making roofs, mats, and other craft works. Another crop grown for agricultural purposes was the kola nut, known as obiabata in Yoruba. Kola nut grew in all parts of Yoruba land, but the first kingdom to produce it in large quantities for exportation was the Ife kingdom. Later on, the exportation of kola nut would spread to other parts of Yoruba land, like Ilesha, Owu, Ijebu, and Egba. The farming and large-scale production of bitter kola, known in Yoruba as Orogbo, also developed the same way in areas like Ekiti, Oyo, and Ilesha. A particular bean tree grew, which yielded a bean called Iru. This bean had a highly sought-after aromatic flavor. Indigo was also cultivated in commercial quantities and used to dye clothing. The early Yoruba people also engaged in livestock farming. In some parts of Oyo, it was common for rich folks to own herds of cattle, goats, and sheep, which they reared and sold. This was done on a larger scale. So the owners required the help of laborers. The workers could have included both paid employees and slaves. And they could have they could have come from within or beyond the kingdom. Most Yoruba people practiced domestic rearing of livestock. However, this was done mainly by women. Some of the livestock included ducks, goats, sheep, pigeons, and chickens, most of which were reared in their homes, compounds, and or neighborhoods. Some of the rich women had much livestock, which fetched them a considerable income. Now, commerce and trade in Yorubaland, 16th century to 19th century. The Yoruba trade practices put them ahead of other kingdoms, especially over landlocked towns and settlements. As early as the 16th century, there was already an established trade relationship between the Yoruba kingdoms and the Europeans. The region was well diversified in terms of agricultural products, which led to a specialization in production and manufacturing. Also, the Yorubas were blessed with some mineral resources. These specializations boosted the volume of internal trade, leading to increased productivity in the agricultural and industrial sectors. This increased productivity also led to a large number of products being exported beyond Yoruba lands. The Yoruba kingdom became great places to trade, with their women ranking among the best traders in Africa. As productivities increased, long-distance trading surfaced, although the elites mostly carried it out during this period. Each Yoruba city had a king's marketplace, or Jaoba, which was a way to generate, receive, distribute, and send out goods on a large scale. Cash crops and food crops like cocoa, kola nuts, and oil palms were all produced in mass quantities. This was aided by the region's topography, good weather, and high-quality soil. The Yoruba trading empire covered many kingdoms and extended as far as Senegal River in the west and the Congo to the east. Even within the Yoruba empire itself, many trading communities and roots were established. Two good examples are the Hausa and Nupe trading communities. Also, traders from the far north, like the Sahara, became a daily part of the trading communities. The Yoruba held the Nupe and Hausa trader in high regard, and they went out of their way to allocate space inside or close to the palace or marketplace for these traders. As time went on, there was an increase in the number of Hausa and Nupe traders frequenting the Yoruba markets. Since many of the Hausa traders were Muslims, the kings gave them land to erect their own mosque, which was usually close to the marketplace. This made it easy for them to observe their prayer break, as they would be close to their stores and market stalls. Other communities in eastern and southern Yoruba land provided residencies for these foreign traders. Through trade, the northerners were able to spread the Muslim religion to the Yorubas. As you can see, many Yoruba kingdoms, economies, and trade were something to behold back then. We were so sought after. We were the best in the entire Africa. 16th to 19th century, we had a template. We were meant to be great. But somehow along the line, we lost it. We lost our bearing. We lost our identity. Now we are battling for it. I'll continue. Manufacturing and the production in Yorubaland, 16th to 19th century. The exponential growth of the Yoruba economy gave rise to the manufacturing and production sector. This played a huge role in the development of many communities in Yorubaland. The agricultural boom and subsequent storage problems led to many products being converted into something new. Crops like maize, cassava, and millet were used to manufacture new food delicacies because they had no storage, or because they had storage problems. So they became more creative and they created new food. They said delicacies. Maize was converted to pap, which could be in a semi-liquid form, ugi, or a solid form, eko or agidi. This delicacy was mostly manufactured in Osun and Oyo region, from where it was exported to neighboring kingdoms and regions. Processing cassava tubers into product was also a productive and lucrative business for all the Yoruba kingdoms. The cassava tuber is still one of the most valuable plants in West Africa. About 250,000 tons of gari, the creamy flavor made from cassava, are prepared in Nigeria yearly. Cassava originated from South America, and it was made known to Nigerians in the 16th century by European colonizers from Portugal while trading for slaves. Its value was not truly known until free slaves started returning in the early 19th century and introduced new processing method for the crop. Cassava is a very versatile product that can be processed into different things, including fufu, a sticky dough, gari, animal feed, starches for gluing papers, and textiles. Gari is the most common byproduct of cassava, and it is made by slicing and grating the tuber rather, then soaking and fermenting them for a few days before grinding and finally frying the cassava flakes. Gari has many health benefits because it contains phosphorus, calcium, and riboflavin. The starch in cassava is called resistant starch, which is good for industrial sizing and gluing purposes. The Yoruba kingdoms made a lot of income from cassava byproducts by exporting them to other regions. These are the positive impacts on the Yoruba kingdom's commerce at the time. Another craft boosted their commercial activities. Let's say another craft that boosted their commercial activities was cloth dyeing. This craft was usually passed from mother to daughter for many generations. Towns close to the Osun Valley were known for their beautiful and excellent dye work. Dyed clothes became an important fashion trend during the Second Era, with the demand for this product increasing across the regions as time passed. Some of the techniques employed in this production process, including tie-dye. This involves tying the cloth into different shapes before dipping it into the dye. The demand for this product significantly boosted the trade of the Osun region. In the early years of Yoruba kingdoms, the production of jasper and the Kalenian beads came into the spotlight, especially in the Oyo and Ife kingdoms. These beads were worn mainly by royals, chiefs, and prominent figures in the society. They were worn on wrists, like this one. Yeah. So on wrists, necks, like the one I have there, and ankles. And they signified honor, power, authority, and prestige for the wearer. It was also believed that the beads would bring them good fortune. The production of these beads was a laborious process, and it required skill, strength, and considerable patience. Findings indicate that it could take professionals about 4 or 7 days, with 10 hours of dedicated work each day, for one bead worker to produce a necklace containing 18 to 20 beads. Beads represented one's power. So if someone increased their station, they will wear different beads to show this. Jasper was the preferred gemstone to signify power. Later on, some other gems like carnelian and red and brown chalcedonic courses would come into play. Several varieties of these beads have been found in Oyo, Ile-Ife, Ilesha, and Benin. Due to the importance attached to these beads, they become considerable and valuable, making the production of beads a lucrative and attractive one, thus increasing the economic revenue of the kingdom at large. Now, the involvement of the Europeans and the slave trade in Yorubaland, the economic part of it. The trade relationship between Europeans and African nations developed in the economic era of the African continent. For West Africa, especially in the Gulf of Benin and along its coast, the European merchants had a well-established trading population regulated by intelligent and experienced African rulers. Some goods imported to West Africa in large volumes include cloth, iron, raw copper, and cowrie shells, the latter of which was used as premium of exchange by the royal populations along the West African coast. Other luxury items, such as jewelry, alcohol, and mirrors, were also imported. The Portuguese were the first to arrive in West Africa when they were sailing around the Atlantic to seek a path into Africa that reached Asia. They arrived on the coast of Benin in the late 15th century. At that time, the kingdom of Benin and most of the Yoruba kingdoms had already become quite advanced. For instance, kingdoms like Ife had already become, kingdoms like Ife, Ondo, Oyo, and some Ekiti kingdoms were already trading on a large scale. The Portuguese set up a factory, a trading post, at the Benin port town of Ugoton, and in other places like Ode Ishekiri. Later on, more trading posts were established by the Europeans along the Gulf of Benin. The Portuguese traders were also charmed by the islands of Eko, which is Lagos, which they would later rename Lagos. So, the Lagos you have today that you hear people call Eko, that is the Yorubaland of the Yoruba coastal land of Eko. It was renamed as Lagos by the Portuguese traders. And that Lagos is what you have today. It will change. You will see. So they said they renamed they renamed Eko to Lagos. However, access to the island was very difficult due to the sandbars and dunes surrounding it. This wasn't the only problems the Europeans faced. Even with the availability of factories in Yorubaland, listen to that, Yorubaland already have factories, already advanced. We're already producing and exporting in large scale before the arrival of the Europeans. First, the Portuguese. Please remember that, right? None could serve. I'll take that again. This wasn't the only problems the Europeans faced. Even with the availability of factories in Yorubaland, none could serve as a natural harbor for large ships. And even if there was, the Ijebu and Ilaje coast weren't as accessible as Lagos. Thus, the major European trade centers with the Yoruba interior kingdoms weren't located on the Yoruba coastline, but rather in the kingdom of Benin. Nevertheless, there were still some trading posts on the Yoruba coast, mainly on Lagos and the Ijebu coast. This grew gradually during the 16th century. Later on, in the early 18th century, the Europeans started a new port in Badagry, which is close to Lagos. However, when compared to Ugoton, it was relatively smaller. There's something I wanted to pay attention to there. And it has to do with the ports. Back in the days, Lagos State Port was never considered big enough to even welcome any ship from abroad, right? So the biggest and the deepest seaport they found is what you have today in Delta States, Abi. So that is where today, when they redrew Nigeria to this one unitary Nigeria, the people who come from now, who are now segmented or partitioned to be eastern part of Nigeria, they would have, they are now being told, right, that their water cannot have seaports in 2022. Meanwhile, as far back as 15th century, 16th century, that is like 17 something, the Europeans found the deepest seaport in what was one of the Yoruba kingdoms back then. But today, part of the eastern part of Nigeria, they found the deepest spot there. Now I'm coming. Let's continue. So when Badagry first started, it was mostly used for slave trading. You hear that? Which brought the Atlantic market closer to the Egba and Ijebu coasts in southern Yorubaland. The transatlantic trade, Atlantic trade, or should I put it like a transatlantic slave trade, commenced during the 15th century when Portugal and other European kingdoms first landed on the shores of West Africa. The Portuguese started kidnapping some of the natives of these regions, who were then taken back to Europe and sold into slavery. Consequently, this resulted in the early development of Ijebu because it had access to the Europeans and their imports, which eventually opened up Osun and other frontiers to the Atlantic slave trade. The Ijebu traders were the top transporters of European imports, obtaining mostly cowries, tobacco, and textiles, in particular, damask and silk materials. I think that is what gave the first Ijebu billionaires their wealth, because they were so strategically located that all the imports of the Europeans are being collected and transported by the Ijebus. But let's read more. The practice of slavery had long been established in Europe, as Europeans had established each other for as Europeans had enslaved each other for thousands of years. And this practice also already existed in Yorubaland long before the Europeans landed on the West African coast, which is true. In Yorubaland, we were already practicing slavery. There are rich people who had slaves, but Yorubas were not, Ijebus and Yorubas were not selling slaves. But Europeans came, where they wanted to plant a tree. It can't be like say tree don't they exist there already. Let's continue. So, however, the practice of buying and selling slaves was extremely rare. There are many people who became slaves because of indebtedness. You get what I mean now? But selling people, selling human being was very, very rare before the Europeans arrived. As of then, slaves, known as an eru, were only gotten as spoils of war. Often, the slaves will end up as palace servants or maids. Sometimes the king might reward slaves to the worthiest of his cabinet and some of those who made the conquest possible. Thus, the Yoruba people owned slaves, but buying or selling them was not in vogue before the Europeans arrived. Also, if an eru, a slave, was allocated to the palace, it could have risen in rank depending solely on his character, loyalty, and strength. In Yorubaland, an eru may have become influential enough to the extent of marrying a princess. The men who didn't serve inside the palace may have been allowed to raise crops of their own on his master's farmland or establish some other enterprise. Of course, he needed permission to do so. Unless he had some serious character blemish, he would usually inherit some of his master's belongings. That is Yoruba practice of eru, slavery, slave and all that. They are mostly what they call the spoil of war. When Yorubas attack themselves, another village, another community, and they conquer them, the people of that village will become slaves in another village. But they are not slaves like they are dehumanized. Do you understand that? Now let us continue. At the peak of the transatlantic slave trade, these erus, which were obtained through war, were sold as slaves. In the pre-colonial era, there were many Yoruba traders, but few eventually became wholesalers, who were referred to as alajapa. The meaning of alajapa, so these alajapas had rankings, and their leaders formed an association called the Parakoyi. Parakoyi, meaning merchant's guard. Slave trading was an expensive endeavor as it involved paying for the welfare and transportation of slaves, traders, and soldiers. The soldiers were necessary to control the slaves and also to launch warfare on villages to capture more slaves. War chiefs and politicians usually had soldiers working for them. Some of these soldiers were free and chose to work for their bosses. However, the majority of them were usually erus captured during previous wars. These soldiers were then sent to battle neighboring villages or communities that were known to be weak. After the battle, the war chief would lay claim to 40 to 60% of the slaves captured by the free soldiers and 60 to 80% of the slaves captured by the eru soldiers. The war chief could then sell these slaves with the help of traders and alajapas. The soldiers themselves also made money by selling the slaves to the Parakoyis. The traders would then transport these purchased slaves to the markets and ports to be purchased by the Europeans. The traders ensured their safe transport by employing soldiers. The Europeans, in turn, ensured the capture of slaves by providing weapons to the traders, who proceeded to sell those weapons to the soldiers. This way, all parties worked together to guarantee the flow of slaves. And on top of this, the Europeans and traders also forged relationships and made alliances. Example of these, of some of these alliances include marriage arrangements, child fostering, and written contracts. This all continued until the 1860s. There are more to read there. And one day I'm going to read you more. The early politics and so on and so forth. And it's called the Yoruba people. I'm a Yoruba man. And I bet majority of you watching me right now, you are Yoruba as well, or living in Yorubaland, or a friend of Yorubas. So most of the time when we reflect on where we were coming from, where we are, we can easily, you can easily tell where we are headed as a people. But there is something I have observed, which is what prompted this conversation to start with. Yeah, it is the fact that for people who have lived long enough, for example, if you are in your 50s as of today, and you have seen, I don't know if I should call it the good, the bad, or the ugly, or maybe you have always been seeing the ugly and all of that, whatever it is. Nigeria's independence is put at 62 years, and that will be in October, by the way. Nigeria is 62 years. Some of you in your 50s who are today supporting and promoting one Nigeria led by other people who are like older than you, even older than Nigeria. What exactly is your motivation? And I'll start with this. Nigeria got to a stage where the young people who make the biggest part of the whole population, so to say, have been met with the most horrible life experiences in the hands of this older generation. Because look at it this way. Many of you in your 50s who are currently standing in between the gap of those who are saying enough, we don't want to continue like this, and those who are also asking that a fraudulently put together country that can no longer peacefully coexist deserves to be, renegotiated and broken up. Then I would understand if there are some young people out of ignorance, out of, whatever it is, misinformation and all that, are championing and pushing for one Nigeria at this stage. Many of you are in your 50s. I mean, you have seen it all. Many of you got, Nigeria, many of you, they gave birth to you, just a moment after Nigeria got independence. You saw the degeneration from when it was looking right until it started looking gloomy and all of what it is today. Yeah? And you also have the characters bringing all this destruction right here, right now, in their own 60s and 70s. Why am I saying that? Yeah. When I look at what they have done to Nigeria, how they have ruined what is meant to be a beautiful life experience for many of us who are young people, then I still see these failed rogue and criminals in their own, pale state of physical appearances, still promising that they want to give us something we are going to be proud of as in the future that they are never going to feature in, right? When you look at those who destroyed and ruined Nigeria, And those who are still bent on doing it as we speak, they are over 50s. If you look at them very well, over 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, some of them nearly 90s. So for 50 years of your existence, 50 years of your existence, and then deduct that from the existence of Nigeria, that means Nigeria was probably 12 years old, roughly 10 years old, when many of you were born. And today, I was looking online and I saw those who are mostly misleading the young people are those who witnessed the degeneration of Nigeria, the division of Nigeria, the burning down of Nigeria, those who even participated. Now I watch them playing the same role again, right? You have a state of emergency as we speak, brought upon us by the failed old men and women. Then many of you in your 50s, you are still championing for these old rogues to continue to determine what the future will be for these young people. And some of you are doing so by throwing in the fabu of respect. How? Nigeria is the worst place to be on earth. I didn't say that. They said Lagos State is the worst city to live in the whole world. Lagos State is the worst city to raise a child in the whole world. Those who did all of that, they are in their 70s, in their 80s. Now, that future they were promising, the young people have discovered that they were all lies. So why am I saying this to you in your 50s? You, all of you over 50s, still promoting this one Nigeria. Is this. You used to be in your own 20s too, Abi. You were once younger, beaming with so much hope, so much expectation and admiration and all of that stuff. And guess those who were in charge of Nigeria giving you those hope? Majority of them are still there. You are in your 50s now. And you are encouraging the young people to listen to these failed rogues and criminals. You are joining them to mislead the young ones. And I ask, your experience shown that even if nobody had any real experience about Nigeria, all of you in your 50s, in your 60s, who are telling the young people to calm down. And when they refuse to calm down, you begin to throw the word respect. That is exactly why I want to talk to you today. What exactly is your motivation? What exactly is your inspiration? What exactly is it that in your 50s, after you have witnessed this failure at this point, many of you are already parents. In fact, you are becoming grandparents as well. Now, you were once those children that you are now bringing to this world, and those who ruined that future when you were in your 20s, 30 years ago. Let's play with numbers. Let's play with numbers. 30 years ago, some of you are in your 20s. Let's say you were 25 30 years ago. Now you are over 55, right? There must be something that you had as hope in your 20s. Today, now you are in your 50s, okay? Right? Whatever, I don't know what it is, right? I can ask, in your own life, what do you call life experience so far, if you want to be so honest, would you recommend another 30 years of your experience and what you have come to know today? Would you recommend that same thing to any young man in their 20s today? Some of you are already doing that, but we call that the Dabimo Sheda. Dabimo Sheda. For 22 years, I'll use that number now. 22 years ago, yeah, many of you in your 50s today, jumping up and down for Atiku, who is a 76 years old man, will be 80 years when if he becomes your president. Or Tifnumbu, 86 years old man that is claiming to be 70. If he become your president, he will be 80 years old. Abi? Now that's the future of Nigeria. Now in your own 50, in your 50s, if we take 22 years out of your age right now, would you say this is the Nigeria you envisaged in your 20s? Would you say yes? Would you beat your chest and say, this Nigeria should continue so that in 30 years' time, your children should experience similar thing? Well, some said, since selfishness and self-centeredness is not something that people are ashamed of anymore. So let me help you here. I am under 50 and I am worried for my future. You know why? The people in their 50s, the people in their 60s, the people in their 70s, they are the ones in charge of Nigeria for the past 22 years in the recent history. Now, what they have done in the last 22 years is to create poverty capital of the world, where more people are now living in poverty, which is now the breeding ground for different kind of crimes, short lifespan, which has also increased the death rate as well. In 22 years, this older generation, they have a destroyed healthcare system, no policy on healthcare, no real one that is a healthcare coverage, no health facilities that they are really building for the people. For 22 years, majority of these old failed rogues, who they said that we should respect, failed old rogues, they have not built one single health center that can take care of their own health in 22 years. That is what they gave to me. That is what they gave to you. In 22 years, they destroyed education and destroyed the means of true empowerment for the people. Education is the biggest tool you can give to any child if you want them to succeed or fail in life. It depends on the type of education you give to them. For 22 years, these people destroy this 50, 60, 70, 80 years old people in charge of Nigeria from local government to federal level. For 22 years, they destroyed healthcare. Today, many of you are resorting to local help because, you have none of a standard healthcare to take care of you. None, you know it. And if you have to go for one, at least at all, you know you can't afford them because they have made you poor intentionally, right? Now, that's the job of these 50 years old, 60 years old, 70 years old, 80 years old people in charge of Nigeria, okay? They destroyed education to the point that they have to send their children abroad to go and get the better standard education that is better than what they are offering you back in Nigeria. Do you know the saddest thing? Now, they fail to invest in education in Nigeria, invest in educational infrastructures in Nigeria for the common man to at least be able to fend for himself or herself. One Nigeria denied that, destroyed all of that. Now, their children that they are investing these billions and billions of your money on to acquire education, these children are not even coming back to Nigeria to add any value to Nigeria. They are coming back just like their parents to turn out to be leeches, scavengers, scroungers, leeches on the system. They ended up being, more and more baggages for the rest of their lives because they feed fats from the same system without adding any value for real, right? That is what they gave in 22 years. So when you look at these people in their 50s and in their 60s, in their 70s and in their 80s, they are continuing to shout one Nigeria, one Nigeria. They have given to me an unsafe place. Nigeria is now the second most terrorized people in the whole world. Now, Nigeria is also this place, the second place where you have the highest terrorism in the entire Africa. This is the legacy of the people in their 50s and in their 60s, in their 70s and in their 80s. They continue to tell you that you need to respect them because they probably have the best for you and me. They have the best of us in heart. They care about me. They care about our future. Now, you are in your 50s and in your 60s, okay? And you are telling people like us that we have no respect. We don't respect elders. We should bow down and then kiss their asses while they fritter away our future. You are complaining about our reaction. You are talking about us having no kind of respect for people who have no respect for us. They built an economy that made us poorer. Intentionally, they won't give you power. And the people that deny you power and put you in darkness, they are in their 50s, they are in their 60s, they are in their 70s, they are in their 80s. Yes, they are. So I ask, what is your inspiration that wants you to continue to keep this status quo as they are? What exactly is your inspiration? So that's why I'm now going to come down to those of us who are under 50. You see, let me tell you something. Even though Nigeria can take our life anytime, mine, yours, any one of us, okay? And there are many ways that this happens. It depends on where you are or whether you want to admit it or you don't want to. I personally believe that if you see anybody in his 50s, in his 60s, 70s, or 80s and above, telling you that you don't know what you are talking about for asking that this Nigeria should break up. If they said that to you, or if you see people in their 50s and in their 60s and above telling you that there is nothing any of you can do, you are all just noisemakers. Tifnumbu is going to be your president. There's nothing you can do about it. And you see them again, they say, Atiku is going to be your president. There's nothing you can do about it. You get what I mean now? And all these octogenarians and all that, right? I'm using these two octogenarians because they are those that have these people of 50s, 60s, 70s behind them. And then that's why I started with the people in your 50s and in your 60s. You probably have been part of the whole Nigeria history. You have witnessed everything. You have lived long enough for you to at least, for once in your lives, be honest and sincere and tell the young ones that they are right. This country is not working. It's never going to work. You've seen it all. But when you turn around and you begin to mislead the younger people, you see, you can forgive. I told people, I said, we can forgive the young people who have failed to learn from their history. But what do we say to this man? What do we say to you in your 50s? And here you are. You saw Boko Haram happened in 1985. You witnessed that. You witnessed Babangida. You witnessed all the killings that followed. And in 2015, you became historians who continue to manipulate them. For what gain? Now, in 7 years, right, more and more young people have been forced into poverty. You see, there is something that people don't know. And that's why I want to say this to those of you who are under 50. Some of you don't know how much of a setup Nigeria is. Are you with me? You have no idea of how much of a messed up it is. I'll tell you a little bit. When they talk about inflation, when they talk about poverty, when they talk about unemployment, you get, do you know that the most people suffering from all of this are the young people? You. So when you see this Arugbo or Jaws, these Dabimoshe das, who have seen Nigeria for what it is, for what it was, to what it is now, trying to bully you, blackmail you, manipulate you, or gaslight you. Me, I will tell you the picture so that you can now understand how much deep shit some of you young people are. For you to be repeating whatever anybody above 50 is telling you about Nigeria. Me, I will tell you something, and I pray it will make sense to you. Although, with the damages done by Nigeria, orí àwọn èèyàn ti dàrú gidi gan. Okay, yé báyìí sìn. Orí àwọn èèyàn ti yí, kò rí òpè mọ́. If it no be food, it no make sense to them. But me, I will try and place it before you. You are going to agree with me. Now, that is because I'm going to use facts here. You see all these killings in Nigeria? All this poverty number they are throwing about in Nigeria. All these things that every all these terrible things happening in Nigeria, including the death. Do you know the victims, the major victims? They are the young people, you and me. So let's play with the numbers now. In Nigeria, it is on record, not scientifically proven, but it's on record that the population of Nigeria that is currently put at 205 million, maybe unreal, but whatever. Out of that population, 74% of that population, they are young people under the age of 30. They are not above 30, under. Imagine, so let me use rough estimates now. Let's say Nigeria is 200 million. Shebi, you know that 50% of 200 million is 100 million, Abi? But we are talking about 74%, okay? Now, it remains 50%, 100 million, Abi? Now, cut that by, what do you call it? Into 2. What do you get? 25 million. Abi? Add down to the 100 million. Making it how many? How much? 25 million. No, sorry. 150 million rather. Now remove 1 million or 2 million, add them to that remaining 50 million. That means if you say 74%, roughly, what you are saying is that the population of Nigeria of 200 million, you can conveniently say 147 million are people who are below 30, under 30. Young. That's not all. They did their INEC registration online, offline, everything. They can't release the figure recently. So they said about 13 million people completed their registration, INEC registration member. They did. Out of that 13 million, they said over 70% again are young people below 30. That is to say, about 8 million of them. So I'm just playing with numbers now. Now, come back here. If they now say, put it this way, if they say Nigeria has over 100 million people living in poverty, who do you think take that chunk number? Who? Young people. How? Let me break it down. In Nigeria today, you will see a 30 years old man, 38 years old man, still living with his parents. Not because his parents were handicapped or anything, but this is a young man, young woman, that if they should leave that house, they will become homeless. They cannot, most of them are graduate, educated. They are still being fed by their parents. They are still being clothed by their parents because of what Nigeria is. And you know that in this life, everybody want to pretend that they are coping, because that's the point. Try and pretend to be coping. You have so many productive, you have so many able-bodied young men and women that are currently jobless, useless. Now, whenever parents or guardian, whenever they fall into poverty or financial crisis, school fees of some of them will have to stop schooling. Yes. Some people, and that's how everybody begin to slide into poverty gradually. It doesn't happen in a day. When your parents and those who are funding you, when they lose everything, then that means you are on your own. Nobody talks about the effect of lost fortune, lost jobs, lost investment, and every other thing that Nigeria has done on so many people. People don't talk about them, the effect of that on their children. What you ended up hearing is that, mommy wonder, if you know this man, if you know this, if you know their father was a very, very great man when he was alive. He had an accident and he died, and everything just changed. Now look at them. That is what Nigeria is. And then you have to see majority of them having to live from shelter to shelter, having to live from hand to mouth, having to scavenge, having to beg to survive. Then they call it the experience, which will make them stronger. Because, if life doesn't teach you this, how will you be stronger? A system that continue to destroy their self-esteem. Poverty. Young people. If you go anywhere right now, when they say young people, well, I mean, when you look at the population of those who have fallen into the bracket of drug abuse, crime, and so many others in Nigeria today, you have them in their millions. All thanks to this older generation that continue to say you have to respect them. They took everything away from you. They did, and they are still doing it. So when you see somebody in their 50s trying to question your reasoning faculty or your reasoning capability and all that, and they're telling you that you don't understand how life works. No, you do. What happened is that you no longer want them to dictate how should you react when those who were supposed to be responsible for you, that's their job, to make a society more conducive, more prosperous enough that opportunities are not privatized. Opportunities are not limited to those in their inner circles alone. Now, they built this and they built us. So they would never have to be the ones to tell you how to react. That's the point. You are young. These older people who are still championing this one Nigeria, it is the same old thing. You are going to become old soon, and you're going to regret that you wish you did take action when you were younger. So the bottom line is this: if you are in your 50s, the question is, what thing they motivate you to continue to believe that the young people should listen to you? The young people should sort of follow your footstep. Your footsteps, your greedy, selfish, self-centered footstep, laced with your hypocrisy called respect, has brought us here, and it's going to get worse. So if you think that it is going to be a business as usual, where we would have to keep respecting people who have no respect for themselves, right? I'm going to advise you, if you're a young person, it is your right. It is your right to disrupt the entire system right now if you care about your future. Now, disrupting the system comes in different ways, all right? I have seen so many of you are already doing, the political disruption, the Shores, the Peter Obis, and the rest of you who feel like you could stage a political revolution against them. I like that. Make them uncomfortable. They have ruined Nigeria. And then everybody who is asking for a peace of Nigeria today, in order for them to have their own peace, my brother, you have all the legitimacy to demand. You see this older generation, you see these Akoshiberos, we call them Akoshiberos. They are old, they are in their 50s, they are in their 60s. They don't want to admit that they have failed, especially the generation that ordinarily should be their children. We are supposed to be the children of some of them. But these are failed people who would rather wait for you to join the queue and ended up in the failure. If those who were in charge of Nigeria, or especially Yorubaland in the 50s, if they had been like all these people who are in their 50s today, if those ones were like them, many of us will probably be working on a slave plantation today. Because you see, these ones, they don't care about anybody. They don't care about any future. And they will blame you for everything, even when they will be the one to deceive you, lie to you, tell you that they are doing it for you. They are not. So when you are done fighting them, the best you do is never to keep the same contraption for them. Don't keep it together. You understand? Keeping it together is not for them. It's not for you. It is for them. Let the energy lead you into taking and making that bold move. And you and I, we can hold hands for peace, prosperity, progress, and development, and safety too. In every part of Nigeria, we hold our hands and say, "Oh yeah, may everybody they're going well." Don't get it mixed up, okay? One of the things I love about Shore is this. Is a way that many people continue to misunderstood for their own reasons, because people can't say they misunderstood Shore per se. Shore said, if you understand this Nigeria, the owners of Nigeria, they are not keeping it for you or me. And at the same time, they don't want it to break up because of themselves. He said, every time you rise up and demand for your rights, the reason why they will shoot you and kill you is because your right is the right that they are feeding on by taking it away from you. He also said, listen, everyone has the right to demand for self-rule, especially going back to our history as a people before they finally force us together as one, right? Shore said, Or you see these rogues who have managed to capture the levelers of power in Nigeria, not for the people, but for themselves. They will kill anybody that want to take it away from them. They will stage a civil war. They will start war. They will do anything. And he said this years ago. Remember? Then he said, if you want Biafra, if you want Yoruba nation, if you want the Kwarafa, if you want everybody to go their separate ways, the first thing you do is to take that power away from these rogues, because only them knows that when Nigeria breaks, you will not see all these billionaires without anything they are producing. You will not see all these criminals looting you blind and at the same time offering themselves to you as your saviors, right? But people no one hear more. Showore said, if now revolution, if now whatever is it going to be, you cannot get what you want from this Nigeria. Not now. Especially not now. If you allow these people to keep that power. So he was misunderstood. Peter Obi came. They asked him, Peter Obi, what are you going to do about this issue of division and all of that stuff? Especially restructuring. What do you think? Peter Obi said, that one a serious thing. Oh, all these things will take time. But him believe, say, if him begin to share the Nigerian development accordingly, everybody will be happy, and then they will not need what they don't want to break away. So, which means Peter Obi doesn't support the breakup of Nigeria, or as a politician, right? That is a tricky question. They will say, but because they are dishonest people. They are dishonest. They will never give you a straight one, right? They asked Shetima, what do you think? Restructuring where people can control their resources so that there will be less friction, less wahala, everybody can be on their own. He said, restructuring my put. To hell with restructuring. What is restructuring? Now, that is the future. It is not a future of unity. It is not a future of progress. It is not a future of development. It is a future of strife, a future of war, division, bloodbath. Just same thing Bukwari is offering you now. That's what I see. I like it. I like your own political disruption too. Anything that can at least, anything that can at least end this, this madness is welcome. Whatever is good, whatever is going to trigger it. That's why people like us are like, we know where this is presently. We know where it is going. And it is not the time to make yourselves, as a young person, vulnerable enough to find yourself pushing these old rogues to continue to decide what your future will be like. I know it's so hard, though. It can be very tough. It can be very tough to, what do you call it? To reject their money, especially with the level of poverty they have put many of you into. And I know so many of you are actually, you are like more pretending. Nobody should know that you are struggling, but you are struggling. All these people in their 50s and their 60s, they are struggling too, but they are comfortable with that suffering. You are a young person. I hope you won't have to make them bully you to silence on your choices. I choose Yoruba nation, and I will continue to stand by that. But apart from that, I am pro-Yoruba, which is Yoruba first. If those criminals who continue to take advantage of our, what do you call it, of our patience, so to say, sooner or later, there is something coming. I strongly believe too. So there is a chapter of this book I'm going to try and read to you some other time, maybe later tonight, where we're going to talk about the Yoruba security. It spoke about Yoruba security, the bravery, the Yoruba's battles among ourselves, among those who try to invade us way back then, to establish sovereignty, to establish authority, to establish a respect, which many of the politicians today are trading off, on a platter, on a plate of porridge. So if you are looking for the book, I think it's £10. So it's called, it is from the Captivating History, the Yoruba People. You can get that if you want to. Read up. Some interesting stuff there. including Yoruba's, Yoruba's interpretation of the beginning of man. Do you understand that now? So our own analogy, or should I say, our own mythology about creation. Yorubas, from our own history, many, right? You know, in the Bible, they told you about Adams and Eve, and then in the Quran, they told you about Adam and Awawu, Adamu at Awawu, Abi. So Yorubas, we have our own history too about creation. Some of them are, it's quite intriguing, and then some can be very, very, So account of creation. Make I read that one to you. They said, see this, they said that Yoruba culture is primarily oral, which means history was passed down through stories, legends, and folklore. In the Yoruba culture, the families responsible for telling the stories had to be appointed by the king. And the role of historian was inherited by the family member who received the most training or knew the most stories. As to be expected, the stories vary. As they tell the story, you go to change. This is where you get to hear the story of Oduduwa. Do you get that now? The story of Oduduwa. Different accounts. Now, listen to this one. They said, just as the scientific world has a widely accepted theory of creation, the Big Bang, yeah? The Yorubas have their own account of creation. We do. Although it is probably more accurate to say account, since there is more than one acceptable, or let's say accepted version. The first and most widely popular account of creation is told as follows. Okay. In the beginning, the whole universe was made up of the sky above and water below. The entire surface of the earth was covered in water. Olodumare, the king of the heavens and the supreme being, sent down some divine beings to establish life on earth. This is how God created the world, or created earth. In Yoruba's account, there are many. While preparing for this journey, Olodumare gave them one chicken, a calabash, a type of a god, right? Containing sand and one palm nut. These heavenly beings descended to earth by a chain and landed on the spot known as Ife, which is regarded as the heart of Yorubaland. Ile Ife ni Orisun. Sure, you know the story. The heavenly beings poured the sand on the surface of the water and placed the chicken on it. As the chicken began to scratch the sand with its claws, the sand began to spread until it formed the islands and continents of the whole world. That's our story. Sorry. That's one version. Another account of this story states that the heavenly beings sent by Olodumare, right? They came with chameleon. And as the fowl spread the sand over the earth, the chameleon determined if the land was dry and solid enough. It is also believed that the areas still covered with water are those places not touched by the sand. The heavenly beings planted the palm nuts and it grew into the plants we have today. The human race was said to have descended from the heavenly beings where it all started, in Ile-Ife. The creation account implies that the Yorubas were the first humans and that other humans and civilizations originated from Ile-Ife. That's another account. There is more. Another notable creation story, similar to the one above, states that when Oduduwa, popularly known as the father of Yorubaland, was sent to create humankind, he was given a chicken and a bag of sand. As he descended down a long chain, he lost grip on the chicken. While attempting to catch the chicken, he lost grip on the bag of sand. So the sand plummeted, and by the time Oduduwa recovered, the sand had already formed a mold. With the chicken seated on it, the sand started expanding, and he exclaimed, Oduduwa exclaimed, and he said, "Ha, ilẹ̀ ń fẹ̀," meaning the land is expanding. That is why we have Ile-Ife today. There is also another one, which is also slightly different. So there is another slightly different creation account states that Olodumare sent a group of heavenly beings on an expedition. According to this account, Olodumare made Obatala the leader of this expedition. But along the way, Obatala got drunk and fell into a drunken stupor. Due to this, Oduduwa had to take over the expedition, and he subsequently completed the mission, thus making him the father of the Yoruba people and all the people of the world. There is also another version. They say, another version says that the Yorubas migrated from Mecca and were descendants of Lamurudu, one of the kings of Mecca. One of Lamurudu's offspring is Oduduwa. This particular one is a lie, but it's also a version that they have told people before. They even did a movie. This version is a pure lie that those who were like the Islamic scholar back then in Yorubaland, they were the ones who smuggled this lie into Yoruba history. But this is what they wrote. I'll read it to you. It doesn't make any sense. It never made any sense. So tomorrow, Yorubas have nothing to do with Arabs. Nothing at all. All the Yoruba tribes that we have no relationship with Mecca or Saudi Arabia or anywhere Arab live. We don't have anything to do with them. All right? But they brought this lie. So I'll read it again. They said, Yorubas migrated from Mecca and were descended from Lamurudu, one of the kings of Mecca. There is no history record in Mecca of anybody called Lamurudu, by the way. No history, no nothing. No historians know anything about Lamurudu or anybody said anything about Lamurudu. Lie, okay? So they said, one of Lamurudu's offspring, Oduduwa, who is the ancestor of the Yoruba people. However, this version did not state the period. Yeah? The period when Lamurudu was in power in Mecca. No time. But it talks about the revolution among his descendants and their dispersion. During this period, the crown prince Oduduwa wanted to change the state religion to idolatry in Mecca. They even did a movie. Can you hear them paying, Misha? Man, we need to educate our people. We need to educate ourselves, honestly. So they said during this period, the crown prince Oduduwa wanted to change the state religion to idolatry. So he turned the mosque into a temple for idol worship. He had a chief priest called Asara, who himself was an idol maker. Asara had a son named Brahima, who as a child detested his father's profession. He grew up to become a follower of Muhammad, the founder of Islam. So what they are saying is that Oduduwa left Mecca before they gave birth to Muhammad, because the son of the person who was carving idol for Oduduwa in Mecca gave birth to, the son of one of the person who make an idol for him was following Muhammad. You see how people doctor history, eh? It is well. Anyway, they said he had while he helped his father sell some of the carved images, he wasn't a willing participant. So the town frequently went on 3-day hunting expedition to celebrate the gods. So Brahma used a yomo Brahma. So you, princess, oh, shey you dey hear am now, eh? All of you omo Brahma. They say you be omo Brahma. Oduduwa we carry this from Mecca. Come Nigeria. Afar, all this are far from Oshu. And them they tell that kind of story. Now them write all this nonsense. But we will teach our children because they don't make any sense. You know they don't make any sense, right? So they say Brahma used one of these occasions to destroy the gods in the temple, since those that might oppose him were out of town. When the expedition party returned and discovered what Brahma had done, he was ordered to be burned alive. This led to a war between the followers of the gods and the Muslims in Mecca. The Muslims won the war, and Lamurudu was killed. His children and their sympathizers were driven out of Mecca. Oduduwa and his children escaped with 2 idols, and they journeyed eastward for 90 days until they reached Ile-Ife, where they settled. Ile-Ife is another name for the aforementioned Ife is an aforementioned Ile-Ife. Should that won't make any sense? Now, so then try use religion or retell our story. Or person go waka from Mecca, Saudi Arabia, he go come reach Ile-Ife in 90 days. You know that Zobo? You hear that Zobo? Very, very insulting. So considering their manners and customs, it is undeniable that the Yorubas migrated from the east. Shey it makes sense? Does that make any sense? Listen to this. Oduduwa was running away from his brothers and sisters, according to this folklore lie. So some Muslims wanted to kill him. So he came to Ile-Ife, which means there were people already in Ile-Ife, Abi, when Oduduwa came. That means there were people in Yorubaland before Oduduwa came. Abi, I'll tell you something. That seems to be the plausible story. I don't know where Oduduwa came from. There was so many cook-up lies about that. But the plausible one is that when he came to Yorubaland, he met the people. Like every migrant. We all migrated from somewhere, didn't we? Yeah, our forebearers, they migrated from somewhere. Right? So they said when Oduduwa came, he was welcomed like our culture as Yoruba people. He was made to feel at home, right? From the process, he even married. Then he became, what did they call her? A babalawo that eventually offered a great help to the town back then, to the point that he was made the chief priest of the town. That's the plausible story. That Oduduwa walk from heaven. Baba live story, Jare. We know the 1860. I mean, we know the 11th century anymore. All those things don't make any sense anymore. Okay. Oh, he came from heaven with this. Oh, he walked 90 days from Mecca. Yorubas from the no. Those are bullshit. But they put them down, and I love the way they analyze them in this book. Right? They make you see that there are versions. Okay, but there are truth as well. Listen to this. They said, after Oduduwa settled in Ile-Ife, which means he remarried. So when he settled, then he gave birth to a son named Okobi. Okobi had 7 children, who will later establish the different kingdoms that make up some of the Yoruba lands today. The names of the princes and princesses are Owu, Orogun, Popo, Sabe, Ketu, Oyo, and Benin. Oduduwa also had a grandson named Oronyo, who would later establish one of the biggest Yoruba empires. Despite all of these varying creation accounts, there is no doubt that the Yorubas regard Oduduwa as their founding and spiritual father. Oduduwa was our spiritual father because of the role he played in our history. Oduduwa did not found Yorubaland. When Oduduwa came to Yorubaland, he met Yorubas in Yorubaland. He met us there where we are. That is the history. Do you understand that now? That is what you must tell your children. So now let me tell you about this. Some people are feeling like Benin care. What it concern Benin? You see what they talk about education. You see that Benin kingdom is one of the Yoruba kingdoms. In fact, from history, which even the Benin will confirm, and they've never denied that, right? Is that one of the children of Okobi became. It doesn't mean that what do you call it? It doesn't mean that. Let me put it this way. It's not that somebody came and then they come out just like they told the story of Oduduwa. Okay, there have always been people there in what is a Benin kingdom, but the person who actually became the king there was a son to Okobi. Do you get that now? Okobi. That is why till tomorrow, Benin and Ile-Ife, the source, Benin will always tell you that Ile-Ife is their source. If you are from Benin, you will know this. But you know the Benin you have today, Edo State that you have today, not be everybody where they Edo be Benin. Sure you know. Do you know? Well, I bet you know. Sorry. Maybe I shouldn't be asking. But if you are not from Benin State, if you are not from Edo State, do you know that Benin, which is the largest ethnic group in Edo State? No be only. So if we say Benin Yoruba, if you are from Edo State, you're not supposed to take offense, okay? And if you are a Benin yourself, no, they take offense because you know you are a Yoruba. You know it. Yes. Anyway, there are origins of tribes in Yorubaland. Origins of tribes in Yorubaland. According to this, they said Yoruba might be one large ethnic group, but there are many tribes within the culture that in one way or another can trace their origins to Oduduwa and city of Ile-Ife. Do you get that now? Let me say all of us say we be Omoife or anything, but there is something from the ancients, right, that linked all of us back there. Okay? Here are they. And when we say Yoruba is the conglomeration of other tribes who have something in common, language. But despite that, even our languages are also kind of different too. But we have tribes. As said earlier, most of the major tribes sprang from Oduduwa's grandchildren. Okay? All of other minor tribes originated from one of these 7 tribes. Ketu, Owu, Sabe, Orongun, Ila, Popo, and Benin. When Oduduwa migrated from the east, there is a possibility that the eastern region contained natives who were conquered and absorbed into the culture. Because, I told you, Yorubas historically, now, war, fight, this, that. So when we fight war on another village, on another community, who have their own culture, tribe, and everything, what were they doing? When they conquer them, they bring them to different, community. And that's how we build this Yoruba culture you are seeing today. But people never lost who they were. Do you understand that? They never lost who they were. Right. So they said the Yoruba culture established and extended their kingdom as far as Ashanti, Ghana, because Oronyo and his brother were able to push their conquest in every direction. Yorubas pushed their conquest war to Dahomey. There were people in Dahomey. Dahomey was conquered by war. Yorubas warriors who are descendants and children of Oduduwa. Do you get that now? And there's always historical record to that till tomorrow. So, for example, Oronyo is known as the founder of the Oyo Empire. He was the youngest among the 7 grandchildren of Oduduwa. Before he departed from Ile-Ife, Oronyo was already a distinguished and brave warrior. This is probably one of the reasons why he became successful in his conquest. Back then, you have to be a warrior for you to be a king. So Oduduwa sent his children, trained them as warriors to go everywhere. There were Yorubas already to lead them, including Oyo. So Oronyo, they said according to one account, Oronyo agreed, which is Oromiyan. I will use Oromiyan. Oromiyan agreed with his brother to attack a northern kingdom that had insulted his grandfather. Another version of the event said Oromiyan left on an expedition to Mecca to avenge the death of his grandfather. That's another bullshit, by the way. So let's go on. On the way, the 2 brothers quarreled and split up, going their separate ways. Oromiyan wandered south to Busa, where a chief there extended his hospitality. After explaining his predicament to the chief, Oromiyan was given a charmed snake. As instructed, Oromiyan followed the snake for 7 days until it arrived at a spot and vanished into the ground. There, Oromiyan established the Oyo Empire. While the city was still under construction, they were constantly attacked by the Bariba of Bogu, who wanted to dominate the new city. At this point, the warrior Ajagunla, also known as Orogun, one of the legendary grandsons of Oduduwa, stepped in and helped the newly found city win the war. Not long after this, Oromiyan had a son named Ajuwon Ajaka. Much later, he gave birth to another son known as Shango. Oromiyan became the first Oba, the ruler of Oyo Empire, and Shango, known as the Thunder God, became the 3rd king. The empire no longer exists today. Oyo Katunda. How many of you remember that? The current Oyo that you have today is not the real Oyo. The old Oyo was destroyed by the Fulani from Bogu. How many of you remember that? Anyway, don't worry. The land is still there in Yorubaland, though. Eventually, they reconquered it, but they had to go and build another Oyo empire. Fulani. Right. So they said, Oromiyan, yeah, okay, I've read that. The current Alafin, or the old Alafin, is dead now. Adeyemi Alafin. They said that the empire no longer exists today, though there is still a ruler over the city of Odo, who claims ancestry to Oromiyan, the current or the emperor. Then later Alafin spoke about that. Now here is another part of the Ijebus. This one of my own parts. So let's hear what the history said about the Ijebus during Oduduwa era. The Ijebus have different accounts of their origin. Of course, I'm an Ijebu man. That's why I don't always believe the version there, right? By the way, so one version states that the Ijebus descended from a victim who had been offered for sacrifice by the king of Benin to the god of the ocean. In the story, history, they said one version of who are the Ijebus. They said started from the Ijebus descended from a victim who had been offered for sacrifice by the kings of Benin to the god of the ocean. However, another account claims that the Ijebus were descendants from Obanta. That is our true story, by the way. We are the Omo Obanta. Obanta himself was also a warrior. And then, a Babalawo. Back then, you needed to be a warrior to lead the people. Most of the time, people are always being attacked, captured, enslaved, and all of that. So somebody will come and say, hey, I'm putting an end to it. I will be your leader. So yeah, oh yeah. And that's it. That's the end. That's the history birth. Obanta is the fathers of the Ijebus. That's why Ijebus will likely not agree to all the account of Odudua dropping from heaven or coming from Mecca, all those stuff. They are not appealing to us as Ijebus. And we are Yorubas. Now, listen to this. They said that who was offered, okay, they said after being left for dead, he revived and crawled into the bush. Listen, they said Ijebus descended from Obanta, right? So who, this one is sacrifice. Who was offered as a human sacrifice by the king of Owu. After being left for dead, he revived and crawled into the bush, where he survived on fruit before later dabbling in farming. It is worth noting that in both accounts, the founders were victims of human sacrifice. Another account claims that Obanta led people out of Ile-Ife to form Ijebu Ode. He led them until he reached old age, at which point he was instructed by Ifa, the chief god and the god of divination, to live and die outside of the town. The king of the Ijebus are known as Awujale, and the current Awujale is Obadetono. In Ondo, talking about tribes in Yorubaland now, they said the killings of twins was a prevalent practice among the early Yoruba people. And somehow, this practice is what brought about the establishment of the Ondo kingdom. One of the wives of the Oyo Empire birthed twins in an era when twins were considered an abomination. The Alaafin Oluasho was not happy about this and ordered them removed from the kingdom. The princess left with a number of friends and journeyed to the present site of Ondo, meaning settler. So Ondo, Ado, Ondo, Odo. So one of the twins died at Ekpe, which was near Ondo. The other twin, Airo, would later become the Oshemawe of Ondo. The current Oshemawe is Kiladejo. I don't know if he's still. Then the Egba people in Yorubaland. The Egba people established their homeland in the Egba forest. After migrating from Oyo, most families in Egba can trace their ancestry to Oyo. Hence, the popular saying, Egbas who do not have Oyo roots must be slaves. This means that if they could not trace their roots, they must have belonged to the early Egba people who were conquered by the settlers. Over the century, the Egba people evolved from small hamlets to villages and are now cities, which operate independently. The first Alake of Egba, Okukenu, Shagbua, and the current one, Aremugbadebo. The Ekiti people in Yoruba. The Ekiti tribe. The Ekiti people are among the original inhabitants of the country absorbed by Oduduwa when he migrated from Mecca. Ekiti means mold, mound, which is derived from the mountainous features of the area. The region has extensive vegetation and is very watered. One account says the Ekiti people are descended from, Ekiti people are descended from one of the offsprings of Oduduwa, Olofin. One of Oduduwa's offspring had 16 children of his own. Olofin decided to venture from Ife in search of greener pastures. Olofin and his offspring journeyed until they reached flat terrain. Two of his children decided to stay behind, while the rest of the family continued their journey until they reached a land with many hills. Thus, they named the place Ile Olokiti or Ile Olokiti, a land with many hills. Thus, so the Ekiti kingdom was divided into several kingdoms over time. Today, Ekiti is one of the states that comprises, that's part of Nigeria. Then you have the Ijesha people of Yorubaland. The Ijeshas have different origin stories because their founder was different from the present day people. The first account relates to the earliest Yoruba people when they had just migrated from the east and subdued the natives. At this time, human sacrifices were common, and slaves were often used as the victims. Slaves were captured from a district called Obokun and treated like cattle to be sacrificed to the gods. This prompted the name Ije Orisha, meaning food for the gods. Another account says the present-day Ijesha hailed from Ekiti. According to the customs back then, they were to go on a 3-month hunting expedition for their king every year. On one such expedition, they found a region with plenty game and an agreeable climate. The native Ijesha, probably a remnant of the former sacrificial victim, was peaceful. However, these people were quickly subdued by the invaders. One of their chiefs was spared due to his kind and gentle nature. He quickly rose through the ranks and eventually became the second in command to the chiefs of the invaders. The current Oba of Ijeshaland, Oba Akinkunle Aromolaron. There's so much. The politics, Yoruba politics, the politics of your early Yoruba kingdom, that too is so interesting. It's part of it. I will read some of them to you some other time, okay? Thank you so much for spending your morning or afternoon with me. I'm going to be back later this evening, possibly. And if you have the time, you can join. That's when we have all our blockbusters as usual, okay? So stay safe and good afternoon.
Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Máyégún ti dé. Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Lórí Facebook. Máyégún ti dé. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Lórí YouTube. Máyégún ti dé. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Bọ́ bàbá gbé wúrẹ́. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Ijó ìgbádìyẹ. Máyégún máa wí. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Pẹ̀sìdó bá rúfin o. Máyégún máa wí. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Kí gómìnà kówó jẹ. Máyégún máa wí. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Ọlọ́pàá ti ń gba rìbá. Máyégún máa wí. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Aṣòfin tí ń rúfin o. Máyégún máa wí. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Òpùrọ́ olóṣèlú. Máyégún máa wí. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Àní ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran o. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dèrò ní fi wọ́n níran. Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀ o. Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. Wọ́n fowó bẹ́ẹ̀. Máyégún ó sọ pé wọ́n ò fẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀. Oníkan ṣáàtì ṣe èyí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe fáwọn ará ìlú tó gbé wọn débẹ̀ o. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Máyégún ti dé. Gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀sùnra kì í. Ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe, ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ ò ní fi wọ́n níran. Kì máa yí ṣe eré, ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣe ẹ̀fẹ̀. Kì máa yí ṣe eré, ọ̀rọ̀ yìí kì í ṣe ṣẹ̀fẹ̀ ẹni bá ti lè lẹ́bọ̀ lẹ́rù o ọmọ bá dèrò kàṣàyè tú wọn síta.
Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kí. Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ súnra kí. ṣùgbọ́n ní bá ti ṣe yìí tó yẹ kí wọ́n ṣe ọmọ bá dẹ́rọ̀ òní fi wọ́n níran.
tẹnitẹni ọmọ Máyégún ọ̀rẹ́ ara ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni mo fọlọ́run sọ ẹ̀ bá kìlẹ́bù lóòótọ́ olódodo ìlú ọ̀tá ìlú mọ̀mọ́ ni ìwọ ṣá máa ń ṣọ́ra kò sì mọ́ bẹ̀rù bọ́tà ń lé ibo níṣègùn lé káwọn mọ̀mọ́ fi ṣera wọn ni ó ti dẹrùn tí wọn ò gbọ́dọ̀ sì mọ́ bẹ̀. èèpo ọ̀bọ lọmọ bá dérò tàjẹ́ ò gbọ́dọ̀ jẹ́ ó ti jọba lórí àbínú ẹni kò sì mọ́ bùyà àìsíwọ́lu ní ẹnìkẹ́ ìgbódì ẹyin lábàrá o ó kó ẹni tó bá dán wò á kàmù. Máyégún ti dé gbogbo ọ̀jẹ̀lú ẹ̀ túnra kì. Máyégún ti